Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. My name is Maria, and I'm new at the Swedish Dialogue Institute. I just joined a couple of weeks ago, and we are, as perhaps some of you know already, a Swedish government agency. We're based in Amman, and our mandate is focuses essentially on bridging Europe and the MENA region around dialogue and cooperation on different thematic issues. Just a note on logistics before we delve into today's topic. The session will be held in both English and Arabic, and it will be recorded. So to select your preferred language, please click on the interpretation icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It looks like a small globe, and then you choose the language you wish to listen in on. I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that. Great. So in today's session, we are looking to shed light on the issue of climate change with a view to identify opportunities to more effectively tackle this issue. And we're trying to look for ways to combine the forces of the various operational sectors, both in Europe and in the MENA region. Our distinguished panelists, who you'll be introduced to very soon, represent several of these topics, these sectors. They include the representing the private sector and also civil society, and they will also be sharing their experiences briefly. Let me also just take this opportunity to express our gratitude, not least to our close partner and friends at ARI for co-organizing this webinar with us, and to particular to ARI's program director, Cyrene, who you will also be hearing more from during today's panel, who's behind the idea of the webinar after we had to initially cancel the original event that was supposed to take place in June. So moving to today's topic. Climate change, as we all know, is one of the defining challenges of our time. And of course, addressing a global issue of this scale requires global efforts. From north to south, we're seeing our regions having to cope with more frequent heat waves, with water stress and rising sea levels. These developments in turn have great implications for food security, for conflict, for displacement, and at worst, an already very fragile context in our regions. To date, the EU and several countries in the MENA region have committed to climate neutrality goals. Similarly, both regions are collecting valuable experiences in how to deal with climate change, which of course includes efforts to transit to renewable energy, which will also be a topic for conversation today. Given the region's geographical proximity, Europe and Middle East and North Africa, and the economic interdependence therein, it's of course of strategic interest to bridge the knowledge that these regions have collected and try to look for ways to enhance opportunities for collaboration. On a final note, before I hand over, I would like to also emphasize that the Swedish Dialogue Institute is fully aware of the difficulty of turning our attention to an issue such as climate change in a region that is plagued, unfortunately, with much more imminent crisis, whether we're talking about Palestine or Syria or Sudan. And of course, our thoughts are with all those directly and indirectly affected by these crises. That said, we hope that today's discussion will contribute to the urgency of dealing with climate change in the regions, not as an abstract environmental issue, but as an aggravating factor of conflict and security and insecurity worthy of our attention. I will now invite my colleague Asil, who will be moderating today's session, to introduce our panelists and topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar. My name is Asil Shaban, and I'm a program officer at the Swedish Dialogue Institute, and I will be moderating the session. Today, we will hear from 4 inspiring panelists from Europe and the MENA region who have experience in building bridges across sectors and borders. Let me give a quick review of the session before we start. It will last for an hour. We will begin with some questions to our panelists, followed by Q&A and closing remarks. We do encourage our audience to actively engage with our panelists by sending in questions in the Q&A. May we suggest that you also indicate to whom your question is addressed. With us today, we have Sarine Karajerian, a program director of the environmental politics at the Arab Reform Initiative. She has an extensive experience in management, fundraising, and partnership. We have also Salah bin Nuh, a renewable energy engineer specializing in social project development. His work focuses on designing and implementing innovative systems that contribute to the global energy transition. We also have Munia bin Buzaid, director of the new markets at Clavister, a cybersecurity company with a focus on sustainable solutions. She is also president of the Amplex Management, specializing in public affairs and international relations, with a focus on establishing Swedish presence in African markets. And lastly, we have Brendan Joseph, is Sweden's official youth representative to UNESCO and vice president of the Swedish Federation of Young Scientists. He has long-standing leadership experience within national youth organizations. So again, a very warm welcome to our panelists, and we're happy to have you with us today. We'll start with you, Serene, also our co-organizer for this session. Just to kick off the discussion, what are the main challenges to integrating the green agenda into MENA's broader political and economic discussions today? Over to you, Serene.
Thank you, Asil, and thank you, Maria, and all the colleagues at the Swedish Dialogue Institute. We're very excited and very happy to be collaborating on a timely webinar and also a discussion to recenter the role of the youth. And also a thank to our colleagues at the Arab Reform Initiative who did all the hard work, Camille and Olfa and every colleague from our communications team. So when we're looking and to respond to your question, we look at four things and four main challenges and barriers when we think of adopting a green agenda in the Middle East and North Africa. One is the hydrocarbon intensity. We as the Arab region are not one block. We have the Middle East countries, Levantine, the North African countries, but we also have the Gulf, and heavily also dependent here on hydrocarbons, oil producing countries, so we're not one region. And here the Gulf economies remain structurally tied to these hydrocarbons. Of course, we have Libya, Iraq, and Algeria that are also oil-rich countries, but the dependence is heavily on the Gulf countries in the region. The second is conflict. And how can we prioritize humanitarian relief? And Maria mentioned it also in her introductory remarks. We live in a region of injustices, conflicts, wars, occupation that is continuing on addressing and putting pressure and exacerbating the injustices that we are still witnessing in the region, such as in Syria, Libya, Iraq, Yemen, and of course, Lebanon, as we are in Palestine under occupation. These are also sidelining the green agenda and are prioritizing short-term humanitarian relief instead of actually centering the discussion around green agendas and justices. If we look at Lebanon, a country where I come from, and this is one of our projects that we have been working along the solar boom, people have resorted or looked at alternative energy and electricity supplies, not because of thinking of the environment and the green agenda, but rather an ad hoc policy solution, and rather because we have to have electricity. That's why we went and installed more solar panels across the different buildings. Again, and here, this is part of our work at the Arab Reform Initiative, is to look at how these crises and these conditions have pushed households, consumers, end users into becoming more ad hoc in coping. Again, the example that I have given around the private solar panels. And instead, we think of very short-term and short-term opportunistic type of policies, rather on a long-term. Specifically, if we look at the Levant, we are very much donor-driven, and also in other countries, but specifically in the Levant, very donor-driven, opportunistic-oriented, whether we think of a big, large dam projects being installed either in Lebanon or in Jordan, unlike other parts of the country. So very much donor-driven rather than having a specific strategy and along the lines of sustainable growth or sustainable development and green agendas. And again, unfortunately, the political instabilities and the infrastructural weaknesses that we are witnessing and it prevents the green agenda and this transition. But also it creates unprepared environment for climate-related challenges, and that can worsen the current consequences. Three are the weak national governance, the weak rule of law, and the corruption that have led to the deterioration of the environment. We're seeing our governance and economic systems that are exhaustive, and our planet definitely needs climate action. And here, to apply the green agenda, primarily, we need a profound political and socio-economic transformation. We cannot just find technical solutions, but we need to look at the social transformation, the economic transformation, and who are the actors and the most vulnerable populations that have been historically left behind. So if we look at the climate resilience in the Middle East and North Africa, we look at governance deficits, technical issues, laws and regulations that are there but not being compliant and put in place. All of this hinders both the mitigation and adaptation efforts that you, Asil, also mentioned in your opening speech. And fourth are the fragmented cross-border governance. If we look at the last Union of the Mediterranean report, it was mentioned that the Mediterranean itself is one of the least integrated regions and stresses that the regional mechanisms are needed to tackle shared environmental challenges effectively. So it has also been reported that rising climate pressures that demand coordinated cross-border action. So what do we do in this situation? And what can we also open up when we look at the EU support and the Middle East, North Africa agenda? One is definitely we need to prevent wars. We need to think of a way to end these different wars that are destroying livelihoods, destroying infrastructure and the ecosystems, wiping decades of development in just a couple of days and sometimes in a couple of seconds. All of this have the capacity which is diverted for survival and relief, leaving no room for sustainable development agendas. And here, going back to the main discussion of today's agenda, what can the EU do? EU needs to prioritize peace in the region, but also a just transition that affects all the vulnerable communities. Without an end to these different wars and occupation, there can be no green transition, no resilient communities, and no just transition. And second, we can discuss as well the technological transfer, depending on how much time I still have. So in the different studies that we have done at the Arab Reform Initiative, again, thanks to also the support of our colleagues from the Swedish International Development Agency, we look at how can green technology and the transfer of green technology is pairing with training, co-design, and inclusive implementation. This means that we're not just imposing technologies or leaving ownership in external hands, but we're ensuring that they are embedded in the Middle East, North Africa's own institutions and its communities. Unlike models where foreign companies dominate national grids, as we have seen with Électricité de France or even Électricité du Liban and others, the goal here should be anchored regionally. And it should be anchored also to finding our own solutions that build sovereignty and resilience in our societies. And maybe I'll here talk a little bit, if I have the time, the different work that we have done, and to quote some of the work from our colleagues from Tunisia, but also our colleagues from Lebanon, and what we've seen in the work in Tunisia's energy sector that has long been shaped by external exploitation, extractivist type of economies, where we have, and we've seen this also in Morocco, where we've seen large projects being invested in North Africa, specifically in Morocco, specifically in Tunisia, but also other parts of North Africa, where local populations are not part of the decision-making processes. And even yesterday, we had a webinar with the Siwi Water Week, and one of our panelists from Morocco even mentioned how Morocco is the agriculture hub and land for Europe that serves European markets, how vegetables from Morocco and other parts of North Africa are being sent to Europe. So it is important to recenter the different dynamics between Europe and its neighbors here in North Africa, but also Levantine countries, and to tackle back to the European Green Deal and EU's Global Gateway strategy We've seen that they have been set specifically to increase investments, financial investments of European investments in North Africa energy infrastructure, potentially turning Tunisia and also Morocco as an exporter of renewable energy, while domestic energy still remains unsecure, unsafe, and unsustainable for local populations. I mean, you can come back later for many different discussions. Thank you, Asi. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Serene, for those valuable insights into the challenges of integrating the green agenda in the region, with some giving some examples from real life and some suggested solutions. That was very interesting. Let's now focus on cross-regional cooperation and turn to Salah. Salah, we know that renewable energy is a shared interest in the Euro-MENA region. In your view, what can the MENA region and Europe learn from each other when it comes to renewables? Salah, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for the invitation and also for making this webinar possible. So, Europe-MENA cooperation has immense potential, especially given our shared climate challenges, water scarcity, extreme heat, but also energy security. So with the MENA region's natural potential and proximity to Europe makes her uniquely positioned to become a hub in various fields. So talking about renewables and with Europe's investment and technology and the MENA region's natural potential, we can clearly how can I say it? We can make sure to build something transformative, but only if we ensure a fair and equal transition. Mean by this, moving away from all extractive approaches and more towards local ownership, skills development, and also short or long-term capacity building. So we can reframe this as a partnership of equals, not charity, but collaboration, joint ventures, and also real knowledge exchange. Because basically, from climate resilience to climate diplomacy, like unity isn't an option, because energy independence and peace go hand in hand. And how can we learn from each other? I think that one of the most powerful ways is by strengthening collaboration between both the private and the public sector from both sides. Of course, climate action is not the domain of just one actor, so we're going to need both the innovation of the private sector through innovative technologies, digital tools, financing mechanisms, all these combined with the structure and support of the public sector. Talking here about effective, and I insist on this word, effective regulations, incentives, and long-term frameworks. And working in the solar PV industry myself, I have witnessed firsthand how can this collaboration be effective. Talking about the region, the MENA region, for example, in Algeria, national solar tenders have brought in private developers to build large-scale solar power plants aligned with government targets. In Morocco, for example, the Noor complex tend also as an example was spearheaded by a public agency but carried out with several private firms. In the Middle East, we've got Jordan with clear policies and feed-in tariffs have unlocked a lot of investment in both solar and wind, making the country a regional success story. So while focusing on the energy sector, the clean energy sector to be more precise, these principles can be applied in other various related, sorry, to the climate transition and everything. So as my colleague Serene said, of course, I think from my point of view, we need to move away from extractive approaches. Local communities, especially who are affected by climate change in these countries, should be participating, giving their advices, sit in the table and make also decisions related to all these topics. We have also the integration of youth, who we can see a lot of developments in this matter, a lot of ideas, a lot of startups that need support and need financing, need to make their voices and be heard clearly. Intergenerational dialogue is also a crucial point. So yeah, basically, I can think of these points from, as I said, both sides of the Mediterranean, and we can make something transformative.
Thank you, Salah. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. And I'll take one of the sentences that you've just mentioned, collaboration between the private and public sector. And I will go to Munia. Your company has vast experience from Sweden in providing solutions for both the private and public sector. What is your experience of cross-sectoral cooperation? And how do you view opportunities to enhance such collaboration? Please, Munia.
Thank you very much, Asil, for having me. Thank you, Serene and Salah, for your contribution. A special thanks to Serene for highlighting the importance of peace and security. Before even starting to discuss any green transition, we need to have the basic of peace and security in our countries. So just a short presentation of myself. I'm Monia Ben Boussid. I've been working the latest 30 years with as a public affairs expert, a woman in the business. Private and public sector has been has been my partners, and I've been working as a tool and partner. The acting company has been Amplex Management. It's a Swedish registered company based in Sweden, works both nationally and internationally, and connecting Scandinavian green company to the African emerging market. So my mission has been to establish green companies in North and West Africa, the French-speaking countries. So from our 30 years of experience from different markets, the key to successful sectorial cooperation is really listening and paying attention to the timing. So understanding market demand and maturity is essential. Moving too fast or moving too slow can be very risky. When it comes to the challenge for the green agenda in MENA countries, the possibility to integrating the green agenda in MENA countries comes with, of course, big challenges and opportunities. And what we can see, these countries, to be positive, are undergoing major changes, and there is a strong ambition to transition to renewable energy and a renewable solution. So the key is, of course, how to get the right dynamic started in our countries. And what we've seen have worked recently is, especially in the energy sector, is a strong and clear collaboration from business, European business or European customers who have a high demand for energy and need the transition, and our new suppliers in the MENA countries. Often challenges arise because one party is not yet ready to open up for cooperation. And in many ways, it's like dancing the tango. It takes two. So dialogue, goodwill are essential ingredients to making a green transition possible in MENA countries. And this is my take. We really need to be two-part interested in the same thing, willing to have a win-win contract and cooperation. And this can be a big facilitator in the green transition between North and South. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Munia. And now I'll move more to hear from a youth representative, and I'm sure all of you who are attending this session are youth. Brendan, what do you consider to be more effective ways for young people to be meaningfully involved in climate and environmental policy? How can young entrepreneurs in the private and public sector influence the green agenda?
Yes, so first of all, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here as Sweden's youth representative to UNESCO. And when we talk about meaningful youth involvement and participation in climate and environment policy, I think one of the most important things to consider is to move beyond symbolism. I think many of you who work with youth participation are familiar with the word youth washing, which means when you include youth in non-meaningful ways just for the sake of saying that you have had children and youth perspectives involved, while they are not having a meaningful influence in any sort of way. So, too often youth are invited to speak, but not to decide. So, in my view and from my experiences, for youth involvement to be effective and to have an actual impact, there are several elements that are important to consider. One of them would be to have institutionalized participation. And what I mean by this is that young people need permanent seats at decision-making tables, whether that might be municipal climate boards, if it's national delegations to COP, or regional partnerships between Europe and MENA region. UNESCO has already piloted youth advisory councils, for example, cultural and education policies. And similar structures could be beneficial in order to involve children and youth in a meaningful way. Uh, One of the other elements that I also think are important is inclusive representation, because when we talk about youth and children, it is important to consider the fact that no youth and no children are the same. The youth voice is not just one voice. Young people from, for example, rural areas, marginalized groups, communities already facing, for example, water scarcity or heat waves are groups that need to be included. Otherwise, we risk to reproduce the same inequalities that we are trying to solve. I think a big mistake that sometimes the adult world makes, if you will, is that we include one youth voice and think that it is enough. But to be frank, there are a myriad of perspectives out there that need to be heard in order for us to get a more substantial understanding of what youth and children face in terms of challenges in the real world. So I think it is crucial to involve several perspectives to get a fuller understanding of what youth and children want to have done in terms of meaningful change. And turning to youth entrepreneurs, here I see a huge potential for bridging private and public sectors, of course. Um, One of the more important aspects to consider in terms of this would be for example, financing and partnerships. Because while what many of these initiatives lack is not creativity, but access to capital, there are tons of young entrepreneurs out there that have innovative ideas and many solutions to contemporary and modern problems, but they might not have the resources or the contacts to actually make reality out of these concepts. So by creating, for example, green investment funds that specifically target youth-led startups, for example, supported jointly by public institutions and, for example, private banks, we could unlock massive potential and make sure that many of these ideas can actually take part of the solution in terms of the green and sustainability issues that we are facing today. Another aspect when it comes to young entrepreneurs is a narrative change. Entrepreneurship also shifts how climate action is perceived. So instead of climate action being perceived as only a sacrifice, it is framed as opportunities, jobs, innovation, and dignity. So that narrative is powerful, especially for young people in regions where unemployment is high. So I think when we also discuss the potential in climate innovations, for example, we need to consider in framing it in a more hopeful way. A lot of young people have issues in seeing a more sustainable and decent future than, for example, their parents did. And I think it is important in order to offer hope. We also need to make sure that with the solutions that we are offering, with the participatory tools that we are giving to young people, we also need to make sure that we instill hope through these methods, so more young people are ready to take on the conversation. And finally, with the theme of Europe and MENA relations, I think it is very crucial. Both the regions are already experimenting with different models. For example, Europe with large-scale renewables and transition frameworks, MENA with the rapid deployment of solar energy and water-saving innovations. And by creating youth-led exchange platforms where young innovators, researchers, policymakers from both regions can collaborate, we can actually accelerate these solutions so that they are culturally adapted, technically sound to suit the different environments we are in, and also socially just. So I think if I would summarize everything I've been saying so far, meaningful youth engagement requires real power. It requires resources, and it also requires representation. And young entrepreneurs can influence the green agenda not only by creating these solutions, but also reshaping how society sees the climate transition itself. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brendan, for this intervention. And I think you all touched base on the partnerships between Europe and the MENA region. And I want to just to take a quick round again with our panelists and ask the same question to all, which is what opportunities do you see for partnerships between Europe and the MENA region to enhance the green agenda? I'll go back to you, Sarine.
Thank you, Asid. I think we discussed the different points. One would be collaboration that is much more bottom up and decentralized, that really promotes the participatory governance agenda. Brandon mentioned Monia as well, Salah as well, but this is important to look at how the EU and its EU green agenda and the Green Deal, and now we're in the middle of a pact of the Mediterranean. What does it really mean for countries from the south, and not just using the Mediterranean as a migration fortress Europe, but really a space for collaboration and partnership between the different neighborhoods. So here, yes, for citizens to embrace this climate agenda, it must definitely be relevant to the local communities, to the surroundings and the needs of the local communities, and really people-centric. And this definitely, and Brandon mentioned, the small, medium enterprises and the NGOs, the different authorities and communities must be involved in developing these types of agenda. And this is the types of collaboration that do need to exist at all levels, and we've seen also much more collaborations at the levels of mayors from the southern Mediterranean to the northern Mediterranean around questions of biodiversity, land, but also seawater conservation, and this is definitely important. took would be to look at finding solutions, that are suitable and are upscalable across the Mediterranean and across the Mediterranean region. So we have large projects of solar panels in the region, but are these sustainable? Are these on the long term, who's being left out? I think this is very important to look at this. So EU here should be supporting these communal solutions, involving local communities and not just supporting and financing large mega projects that are not necessarily sustainable and also equitable to local populations. And three, I would say allocate more funds. Of course, we've always discussed about finance and financial mechanisms, but really looking at also sustainable financing. What are the existing technological transfer within the North and the South? How are these funds proportional to its population size? Who's really benefiting? The historical emissions have to be taken into account, but also what are the domestic needs and not just brought up solutions. We've seen a lot of funding that is coming towards the region, but again, these are, to name a few, only 1% of these mobilized funds are actually reaching the local communities. And here I'll maybe end with that yes, it's true that we are using the Mediterranean, and now we're at a crossroad of thinking of the Barcelona Convention, more than 35 years, we're this year celebrating. And I think this is what we need to look at, how to use the Mediterranean as a space of contestation or a space of collaboration rather than a space of contestation, and putting more policies that are supportive and collaborative across the multiple regions. Thank you. Back at you, Asil.
Thank you so much, Sarine, for all these points. I just want to encourage everyone to write in your questions in the Q&A, because we will start having some of them as soon as we finish this round. Thank you again, Sarine, and moving to Salah. Salah.
Yeah, so I do think of two main approaches. The first one related to energy, which is the promotion and use of green and clean energy sources. Of course, after securing the well-being of the local population and energy security and independence, we can start see how we can collaborate on effective either selling of green, whether it comes from solar or wind, but we basically focus on solar due to the high potential of the region. So either through direct line, like they are trying to accomplish, for example, between Algeria and Italy through Tunisia, or through technologies like green hydrogen, even though the technology is still expensive right now to be used. But yeah, we're counting on all the work that is being done by the researchers. The second one, I think, is through education, linking universities, creating programs, educate all the youth that have a lot of bright ideas. I've been talking to a lot of people in from both sides of either in the MENA region or Europe, met them all, a lot of bright ideas, creative projects. In general, I like financing support. And I think that through education, through linking programs, a lot of initiatives, we can see a lot of improvement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Salah. Munia?
Yes, I would like to come with, I would like to point out the growing role of AI and digitalization in many of the emerging markets. The more we digitalize our system, the easier it will be to build transparency, communication, collaboration, etc. And hopefully this will also make a cross-border cooperation, make the cross-border cooperation smoother. It's something that we need to count in the green transition with our emerging markets. Thank you.
Thank you, Minya. And Brenda, I know you already touched base on that, but just if you can make it very brief, or if you want to highlight one of these points related to the same question, Eumina, please go ahead.
Absolutely. And I would say, as for young people in both Europe and in the MENA region, we obviously share the same reality at the end of the day. We will live with the consequences of today's climate decisions far longer than those making them right now. So that is why cooperation between our regions must put youth in the center. And obviously see different options and opportunities in this. But one that I would like to highlight is youth platforms for co-creation. So platforms where youth get to not only share ideas, but also treat each other as experts with our own local unique knowledge. Because too often I feel like in these instances, cooperation has been one directional, with the global north seen as a truth holder, or as the one setting the direction for the future. And I think what needs to happen in this context is that we also need to move past that post-colonial mindset and build equal partnerships, so that young people from all across this region, but also all across the world, can offer their perspectives on the same conditions. So that is something I think is crucially important, both for the type of discussions within climate action, but also for dialogue between youth in general. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brendan. So I see more questions coming in the Q&A. Again, a reminder, in the Q&A box, not the chat one. So the first question is, maybe Salah can answer this, because I do encourage you, again, if you want to post your questions, mention who you'd like to address the question to. But could the increasing reliance on solar energy have negative impacts on climate and the environment? Another in Syria, the agricultural sector is facing serious challenges due to the shortage of labor, as many farmers are joining the army and security forces. This threatens the sustainability of the agricultural sector. What solutions could be considered to address this issue? Maybe Salah can answer this question, or any of our panelists, if you'd like to take
Yeah,
a
basically,
turn.
I can answer most of all the question about the solar energy impact, the possible impact on the environment, and on
Please
climate
go
in
ahead.
general.
Thank you.
So yeah, basically we produce clean energy with solar panels, but it has some impacts on the environment. First of all, the land use. You're gonna need a lot of spaces. Talking about large scale solar energy production. So when you have large deserts, even though the temperature has an impact on the efficiency of the system, but having large deserts and everything, it's not the same, like, for example, in Europe, where surfaces are a little bit limited. There's also the fabrication process. We use a lot of minerals that are a little bit rare in a lot of places in the world. Um, Third, I can say the lifespan of the solar panel. Basically, it can last from 25 to 30 years. So after that, we're gonna have to deal with all these panels, and the recycling process is a little bit complicated right now. We can recycle something like 30% of the solar panel. So these are the main impact that we are dealing right now, and I mean, researchers and everything are trying to improve it for better use in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Salah. We also have another question on youth, and I think can be taken by Brendan. It says, how can we enhance collaboration between youth in the MENA and EU to implement projects on green transition? And what are the mechanisms to ensure the sustainability of such initiatives, and how it can be supported by the public and private sector? I think this was translated into Arabic as well. Please, Brendan, can you take this question?
Absolutely. I think for the latter part of the question where you mentioned sustainability, I think one of the more important things when it comes to youth collaboration across Europe and the MENA region is about a long-term connection and a long-term sustainability in these types of projects. More often than not, when I have seen these types of initiatives, they are usually spanning for a couple of years and then they conclude. And unfortunately, most of the outcomes and the results, the learning experiences from these projects are not to be found anywhere after the project period. So I think what the private and the public sector could do in this instance is to offer more long-term solutions in terms of activities and platforms for youth to make themselves heard and collaborate across the region with their peers and, for example, Europe and the MENA region. So I think that is crucial. And for the first half of your question, I think we touched upon it a little bit before, but I think one thing that I would like to stress in terms of this is apart from the genuine knowledge exchange that I mentioned before, youth-led partnerships are also something that would be crucial in order to establish this. Because I think when young people collaborate across borders, whether it might be in science or entrepreneurship or policy advocacy, we create solutions essentially that are not only innovative, but also more just and inclusive. So in this instance, youth can be the bridge that makes cooperation real and just not rhetorical. So I think youth-led partnership is also important. So keeping in mind that we should have youth to design these types of initiatives as well, so that they cater to the broad majority of youth and children in these specific audiences. Yes.
Thank you again, Brendan. Um, our apologies, we missed responding to the Syria question, but perhaps Serene, if you want to address this issue of sustainable solutions in countries affected by conflict.
Sure, I'll try to respond. I mean, of course, if we look at Syria, I mean, we've published also several publications around the forest fires that happen on the coast, but also inland on the different forests. So if we're looking at agriculture, that definitely has been impacted by the recent forest fires that have occurred in Syria. But maybe to go back to the question, what are the existing solutions on the long term? And yes, of course, it's not just there is the climate change that is causing drought, but also there is internal migration that people are moving from Hasake, from Deir ez-Zor to other big cities such as Damascus or around, Rif Shem. So yes, there are definitely internal movements. As a solution, I mean, now we are thinking of a transitional government that is in place. So there is definitely a lot of trust that has to be put in place when it comes to this new transitional government. The second is we still have issues of electricity. The currency, the Syrian lira is still very, the hyperinflation is still there. So there is a lot to build when it comes to accessing electricity, accessing solar, water, accessing all of this will be in the next phase. And yes, there's still also weaponizing and weaponization that has been used on the populations, specifically the farmer populations. And Syria has been the breadbasket of the region since we were children up until today. So to go back to this to the breadbasket of the region, we need to rebuild the infrastructure. We need to bring back also the workforce. There's a lot of young Syrian women who work now in Lebanon due to the war in Syria and the migration, and we're seeing even all these, they have been working in the labor force of agriculture. So will these populations go back to their traditional land, to the land of cultivating and reusing? And again, this goes back to rebuilding trust, electricity access, but also providing subsidies to the farmers and making sure that they are part of the workforce as we rebuild the economy of Syria. I'll stop maybe here, but in terms of youth, and this is, and I think it's very important, the point that Salah and or Brendan have mentioned, education is very key, and building collaborations within universities is really essential, and offering specific, trainings when it comes to journalists. How do you, young populations is definitely key and important in the building of the curriculum, but also building societies post-conflict. Thank you.
Thank you, Serene. We also received so many questions about youth, and I think most have been already replied by Brendan. But thank you so much for this insight. I think it was needed. With that, I think we're we will need to close up in a bit, but before doing so, thank you so much for all your interventions and contributions to this discussion. I'll move now to our Deputy Director, Ms. Maria, to do her closing remarks. Maria, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for this. And again, I just wanted to reiterate Asil's thanks to all of our panelists and the teams that have been working to put this together, but also for the very rich and timely discussion on these issues. I believe, I mean, I'm not going to be able to do a fair, I think, summary of what was said, because I think that you all addressed this issue from different and very equally valuable perspectives. But I believe something that a few takeaways I think that we should bring into our work and further conversations is generalizations are damaging to our cause. Several of you spoke of it, panelists, and you made the case that indeed the MENA region is not one region, and neither actually, we could say the same about Europe. So we need to be very delicate in the way we deal with these generalizations. And of course, the reason for that is because we can create better responses when solutions are tailored to the exact circumstances and the needs of our different contexts. And the same, I believe, when we spoke about youth, that youth is not one voice or one perspective. So we take that very much with us into our work. And another thing I believe that was emphasized by you all in one way or the other is just emphasis on local communities or bottom-up solutions or approaches, if you want. It might be tempting for investors or donors indeed to throw money at the big promising projects, but at the end of the day, if we're looking for sustainable and long-term solutions, we need to work with the people that are primarily affected by these developments, and also we have a lot to learn from them and let them be part of that decision-making process. I believe another quote that was said by one of you is that we need to look at the broader region as a space for collaboration, not contestation. And of course, as some of you alluded to, we're looking now at the new strategies and pacts, the new Europe Mediterranean pact that's being under development, which, as far as we know, have also taken into consideration local views and perspectives, unlike the initial Barcelona process. So we look also equally as forward to looking at the outcome of those consultations, and hopefully we'll end up at a better place in terms of really driving solutions that match the needs out there. And last thing I thought was of course important was I believe Mona said that the key to sectoral cooperation is timing and maturity, and of course we cannot forget about that. We have to move at a pace that I think is relevant to all involved, and not rush into things just for the sake of it. I'll just wrap up there, I believe. And again, a huge thanks on behalf of the Swedish Dialogue Institute and to our partners at ARI also for co-organizing this event. And we look very much forward to seeing you in future events. Thank you.
Thank you.